We can recognize Dorothea Dix's name for the Dorothea Dix Park right next to NC State campus. The park consists of rolling hills, a sunflower fields, and a cemetery containing the inhabitants of the mental hospital that was previously built on the land. Today, it is in current use for both a park and an administrative center for the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. Now we move on to our question. Who was Dorothea Dix? I was born Dorothea Lynn Dix in Hampton, Maine, 1802, where some accounts describe problematic parents and a rocky home life. I moved to Boston to live with my grandmother when I was 12, and became a school teacher 7 years later, setting up an elementary school in my grandmother's home. I believed that women should be educated the same as men. I even wrote a short book called Conversations on Common Things, or Guide to Knowledge, with questions, that was set in a conversational tone to provide young female teachers more widely available knowledge. I taught for a while, but horrible bouts of cough and fever began to arise from my constant working. Some people suggest that I suffered from my own bouts of physical illness and depression as my illness progressed. Through these struggles with illness, my passion for mental health institutions was sparked. This zeal for advocacy became all-encompassing after traveling to Britain to meet fellow reformers. After this visit, I set about traveling the country to investigate conditions in state prisons for the mentally ill, which opened my eyes to the horrors unfolding. Even though women were generally barred from participating in government, I convinced authorities to reform the status quo by describing the horrors of the current system regarding mental illness. This is just one part of one of my letters. I come as the advocate of helpless, forgotten, insane, and idiotic men and women, of being sunk to condition from which the most unconcerned would start with real horror, of beings wretched in our prisons and more wretched in our almshouses. I proceed, gentlemen, briefly to call to your attention to the present state of insane persons confined within this Commonwealth, in cages, closets, cellars, stalls, pens, chained, naked, beaten with rods, and lashed into obedience. I spent 6 years crafting and pushing the Dix Plan, which would have used 10 million acres of federal land to either fund the project or have mental asylums built upon it. Although approved by the Congress, the current president, Franklin Pierce, was a staunch opponent. Conversations at the time were more focused around slavery and the possibility of an ensuing war, instead of an issue removed from the view of daily life. This original plan may have failed, but I was truly influential in changing the American attitudes towards mental health. I served as the superintendent of Army nurses in the Union Army during the Civil War for 4 years, where I made quite the name for myself for being a hardball, making leaps forward in the role of women in medicine. And once the war ended, I went straight back to my work of advocacy and building hospitals. Thank you. Dorothea Lynn Dix died July 17, 1887, in the New Jersey State Hospital, a hospital she had helped construct. In the end, she founded or expanded 30-plus hospitals for the mentally ill, and introduced the idea of moral treatment and compassionate care to the U.S.